I'm Bill Hemmer. This is Hemmer Time. Mike Massimino, welcome back. It's great to have you.
Bill, always a pleasure, whether we're on your television show or your podcast.
Yeah, I love you make space easy, you make it exciting, and that's why I love to talk to you, especially given the events of this past week, Mike. And that's why I've got you back. By way of introduction, you're an astronaut, you're a professor at Columbia University, you're connected with the Intrepid Air and Space Museum here in New York City, and you've got a podcast called Two Funny Astronauts.
That's right, Bill. But just as our disclaimer is, we are not claiming to be funny people. We are just funny for astronauts. So hold us to that standard.
Okay.
The low bar.
All right. Noted on that. Scale of 1 to 10. How did you rate the Bezos event?
Well, I'm kind of an optimist. I would say I would say my first reaction is that it's a 10. I thought it was great, but this is maybe a 9. I don't know if we could. I thought it was really great. I thought there were a lot of good things about it. The launch was terrific. They've done this 15 times before, including once back in December of 2019. My students at Columbia had a payload on board, a biomedical payload. You're only getting a few minutes of zero gravity, but still you can learn some things from that. And I think this is certainly something that'll lead to more. And the crew he had with him, I was really excited to see Wally Funk go. I think that's the story within the story. The whole thing about being one of the Mercury 13 women who were looked at as possible astronauts and not able to be considered that much further because of the rules where you had to be a combat high performance jet test pilot back then, which was restricted to men. And they have her go up at her age now. So all these years later, I thought that was a great.
Yeah, she's 82.
So I think it was a lot to be excited about.
Have you met her, Mike?
No, I never have. I really would love to, though, man. She seems like she's a real hoot. She'd be a lot of fun to hang out with. No, I've never met her, though.
Well, I saw a story where she said she was underwhelmed. And she gave the flight 2 stars. So,
how many stars?
2, which I assume is out of 5, which in my book is less than a C grade.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. The thing is that she was invited to do it, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe if she would have paid for it, she would have given it 5. I don't know because sometimes because I think so you pay that much money, you're going to want to come back with a 5. But that's interesting. What was her comment on it?
I think her expectation was different. She was thinking that she would see this brilliant blue orb in the distance, and based on how high they went, 62 miles, still suborbital, right? But it's not high enough to put Earth really in the rearview mirror, and I know you understand that because you've been there.
Yeah, you've got to get far away for that. Where the space station is 250 miles, and where I was at Hubble's 350. And at Hubble, you can see the curve of the planet, but it still takes up your field of view. For it to be in the rearview mirror, you got to be on your way to the moon, really, further away for that even. But yeah, that's 62 miles. You don't get the same perspective that you do at a higher altitude, of course. Mm-hmm. Like when you're in orbit. But
anyway, she gave it 2 stars, which is probably less than the restaurant you're going to eat at tonight down the street. Mike, I want to get a sense of like where we are, perhaps where we're going with this. I'm fascinated by it. It. Through our relationship over the past several years, and I know you're just such an expert on it. But let's take it one at a time, and let's begin with Bezos. Space tourism is his thing, right? Suborbital orbit, rather, for now. 4 minutes, zero gravity. Sounds great. I'd love to do it. I would raise my hand and do it in a heartbeat if I could. Big windows on this capsule, and that seemed to be like one of his selling points. To you, does that matter, by the way, as an astronaut?
Yeah. No, I think that's really important. You want a window. And it's for morale and to be able to observe. And for scientific reasons, on the space station, there are the cupola, which is a very big window area on the space station, and on the shuttle we had some pretty big windows to look out of as well. But you want that. You want to be able to take pictures and observe even for scientific reasons, but also for morale. And that's what you're going up there for. And that's part of the motivation for any astronaut, even if you're a professional astronaut doing your job up there, but especially for someone who's going up there to enjoy the view. You want a view. And so I think that I love those windows. I was able to sit in a mock-up a couple of years ago of the spaceship, and I just love the windows. That thing is designed for people to enjoy, even if it's only a few minutes, to enjoy it to the fullest.
Mm-hmm. So you were in a mock-up of New Shepard, the capsule?
Yes.
What'd you think?
Conference. Jeff Bezos has like a tech conference that I was invited to for 4 years, I guess, in a row until COVID hit, and so we skipped these past two springs. But he's had. I saw a Blue Origin rocket there. He always had kind of like a Blue Origin station there, sort of, what the latest was, and some other interesting things that he'd done, in automation, robotics, and artificial intelligence. But certainly Blue Origin and his space interests were represented there, and they did have a mock-up there. I think it was 3 years ago, and we were allowed to go inside and sit in the seats and they at least get a feel for what it was like.
Mike, were you impressed or not so much?
No, I was. I think it is designed to enjoy that type of ride. That you're in a comfy seat, or as comfortable as you can be, in a good position to take the G-forces. And you can look out the window. You can see out the window the whole time, which is what your experience is going to be, is mainly visual. You do get to float around, so there's room to do that in there, and you do get to experience the launch, which is quite exciting, and the entry as well. But you're also able to watch it the whole time. You do have a window seat, and then you can, when you unstrap, you're able to get to that window and enjoy the view.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because he's going to sell seats, and one of the selling points will be, just listening to your account, will be the perspective you'll have because of the size of the window. And I think it's roughly 3 feet by 2 feet in front of you on board that capsule.
Yeah, that's big for a window. Yeah, windows are kind of hard to do and interesting and a bit more expensive than not having a window, because it has to withstand launch loads. It has to withstand a lot of heat. It has to be radiation protected so that you don't get ultraviolet rays that might be coming into you when you're above the atmosphere. So the bigger the window, the more the expense and the complexity of it, believe it or not. So windows aren't necessarily the easiest thing to have, as opposed to not having a window there and just having the skin of the spacecraft. Wow. So, I think it's great. I don't know of any windows that are bigger than that on any of these other spaceships. So that's definitely an advantage that they would provide.
So let's move to object number 2. Richard Branson, 2 weeks ago, right? He used a plane to get to high altitude, then launched this, what I call a rocket ship, that takes you up to roughly 60 miles, give or take, less than what Bezos did, to suborbital space and zero gravity experience. Do you prefer that over Bezos, or not necessarily?
I think, Bill, each of those have their own advantages. With Bezos from the launch pad, it's very automated. It's almost like, I don't really want to call this, but it's almost like an amusement park ride. Well, you get on, someone from the ground is operating it. You launch without really not much training. I don't think, just some emergency training, I'm sure, but you're not flying that vehicle, and you come back close to where you launched. And then there's a very good abort system on there that they tested 3 times previously. That if something's going on with the booster that you don't like, that crew, spacecraft, the capsule, the cabin can separate and come back in the parachute. And they've tried that in different configurations. It seems really robust and safe. And if you continue along what he's planning to do, you build bigger rockets, like he's building New Glenn, and you can get yourself to orbit with a similar system. And the booster comes back and lands and very close by, put fuel in it and launch it again. With Branson, he's not tied to a launch pad. He needs a runway, but runways can be anywhere, right? We have runways all over our planet. So theoretically, you could launch that thing from anywhere, and you can land it anywhere. You need a big enough runway, but we have plenty of runways that would accommodate that this system he has. And that means that you can get to different inclinations of orbits. You can go to different places when your launch pad kind of dictates the range of inclinations. Inclination is the angle that you have if you're going to orbit, let's say. Neither of these guys are going to orbit right now, but if you're looking at trying to get to orbit, the where you are on the planet, it dictates how high north you can get, how much energy it takes to get to a more northerly orbit, and it's dictated by that spot you're launching from. So if you can move the launch pad theoretically by going to any runway, you can go to different inclinations, different orbits more easily with that. So that's an advantage there. It lands on a runway, which provides those advantages I mentioned, but you also need someone to fly the thing. And those pilots flying both the mothership that took the spacecraft up and flying that spacecraft are highly trained test pilots. One of them, C.J. Sturckow, who has flown into space twice out of the 4 flights that they've had with people on board with Virgin, he was on 2 of the test flights. He is a former astronaut, Marine test pilot, commander of the space shuttle, good friend of mine, great guy. But he's a really well-trained, highly qualified person. So it's not just showing up and getting inside on that one. Yeah, for the passengers, it might be, but you do need someone to fly the vehicle, which is a little bit different than what you have with the Bezos model. So I think each has its advantages.
Yeah, some give and take based on that answer in each one. Before I get to Elon Musk, you mentioned the amount of prep they gave for the Bezos thing. I was stunned by this. I mean, you're an astronaut, you're in school, you're training every day, week after week, maybe month after month. They had 14 hours of prep. Which I think basically is, okay, guys, here's where you sit, here's where you buckle up, and if something goes wrong, well, then you're on your own.
Yeah, but if something goes wrong, the automated systems are probably pretty reliable. I mean, something can always happen, but I think the advantage of the I know you wanted to, we were going to get to Elon Musk, but when he that spacecraft that they fly, SpaceX, is highly automated. And when they first started proposing this, and since it was a NASA contract and it was taking astronauts to the space station, we were involved fairly heavily with that, looking at requirements. And since it was so automated, there was some concern about automating so much of it. And we still wanted the astronauts, the NASA astronauts, or the astronauts from the professional astronauts, let's say, that working for governments, to be able to do something to interact with the vehicle in case of emergency. But what we found is that the automated system is actually in most cases more reliable than people. And that there's a greater chance of messing up with a person, even if they're highly trained. So there is some advantages to all that automation that they have. I think the advantage that might not be obvious is, as you mentioned, the 14 hours that it took. You're going to probably need more. You're going to need a lot more than that for the SpaceX vehicle, but in general, having less time to be required to train to fly the vehicle, you can concentrate on other things. Bill, looking back at the space shuttle, for example, it was amazing the amount of training it took to fly that vehicle. The qualified test pilots that we had the best pilots in the world. You can argue that, but in my opinion, the best test pilots we had in the world from our country and other countries would be trained to fly that vehicle. Thousands of practice approaches, thousands of hours in a simulator. Even me, I was not a pilot, even me as a crew member to help out, I had so much training on just working the systems, how to fly the vehicle, mainly for emergency situations. Intense training, a huge amount of workload, months and months and months. When you were assigned to a flight, you still needed, even that you were fully trained, you still needed at least a year to a year and a half to get ready, just to have all this stuff fresh in your head. And it was stuff, Bill, that probably wasn't going to happen, because all those emergency scenarios of landing across the ocean in North Africa or Southern Europe, or the emergency landings up the East Coast, or returning to the launch site, all that stuff that we practiced over and over again never happened. It never happened. Either we had a good day or a bad day. Occasionally there were situations where they had to shut an engine down and things occurred, but most of that training was never really used. It was just in case. Now with these more automated vehicles, even if you're a professional astronaut, there may be more to know than what you're doing if you're going to go on the Blue Origin spaceship. But certainly you can use your time and your training time to concentrate on other things, like your spacewalks and experiments and working the robot arm and everything else that's part of the space flight. And the training time goes down, and that's what also drives the cost down. It opens us up to more people. So I think it's a good thing that these vehicles are becoming more automated. We got to be careful with it, but I think overall there's a lot of advantages to it.
Yeah, very interesting answer, Mike. And what's escaped our conversation is just the dangers of doing it in the first place, because we have made it look easy. And I frankly, I think a lot of people from the outside look in and think, well, this is a no-brainer now, and it's not.
No. Anytime you have powered flight, which means you're on top of a rocket, and we call it, the minutes on the space shuttle, it was 8.5 minutes, and it's about 8.5 minutes going to orbit on any vehicle if you're going to an orbital, or going to orbit. Those 8.5 minutes, or of the whatever, how many minutes, I think it was 3 or 4 minutes, they were under powered flight for this suborbital flight. You're at the mercy of that vehicle working, and there are certain things you can do to train. The shuttle, we didn't have many options. We had to wait until the solid rockets went away, and we either would, if we had an issue, we would try to bail out, or that would be the worst case, or try to make it to a landing strip somewhere with the shuttle. In this case, the abort system is much better. It's similar to what they have on the Soyuz, and we did have an abort where we had to abort a flight. It was about 2 or 3 years ago. More like 3 years ago, where they aborted a flight to the space station on the Soyuz, but the crew survived. They got away from the booster and no problem. And I think that's going to be the case with these vehicles as well. But still, you're still when you have a rocket burning underneath you, it takes a lot of energy to leave the planet. A lot less to go to suborbital than to go to orbit, but still quite amount of power and energy. Mm-hmm. And something can go wrong when you're dealing with stuff like that. But sure. But I think they are making it as safe as possible. Yeah. I think they're going to be okay.
So I see Elon Musk now. I see a lot of comparisons between what he is doing and what Bezos is doing. And I did not really understand or appreciate that until the other day. But in general, and just a broad generalization here, Musk is using larger rockets for a deeper space voyage. Would that be accurate?
That's what his goal is. Yeah, I think he's stated that he's interested in going beyond low Earth orbit. He was providing. He was also working with NASA, whereas Bezos, it appears, was funded primarily from people buying tickets, and Jeff Bezos. I'm sorry, what did I say? Branson was on Virgin Galactic, funded by people buying tickets. I think to a large extent, and I'm sure his own money as well was put up. And Jeff Bezos, again, thanked that during his press conference, thanked all the Amazon employees and everyone that uses Amazon because they funded Blue Origin.
He's not wrong.
He's not wrong, man. So the taxpayers funded all my flights, so thank you for that. It's just a different source of money. I guess we're all paying eventually. But what Elon Musk has done is he has gotten a lot of government contracts from NASA, and to fly cargo to the International Space Station, and now flying people to the International Space Station. So he went right to orbit, unlike these other guys that are doing these suborbital flights. He wanted to go to orbit and responded to that commercial crew contract that NASA put out toward the end of the space shuttle program. So he's been very successful with that, but he has his sights going on much further journeys. Going to Mars he would really like to leave the local area here, even beyond where the moon is, getting away from orbiting the planet and putting people in a completely different orbit to a place like Mars would be the goal for that. So yeah, I think he has much different goals. Although I think Jeff Bezos would like to do the same, but he seems to be a little bit more methodical about it, taking smaller steps to get there.
Interesting, huh? We had well over 2 million people on Fox watch that launch the other day. That's a big number, Mike. And I just wonder if we're coming into a new golden age of space. And I'll let you answer that in a moment, okay? But first, this break on Hammer Time. Back with Mike Massimino, terrific guy, astronaut, Columbia University, intrepid, and the host of his own podcast called Two Funny Astronauts. So pressure's on. You set the bar high when you call yourself funny, Mike.
I know, but remember, we're only funny for astronauts, not for regular people.
Noted. I got you that. I mentioned a moment ago more than 2 million people. There was a lot of curiosity on whether or not this can happen, and it is a very dramatic moment. But here is what I did not understand until I started doing a lot of reading this past week. Bezos started this company, Blue Origin, 21 years ago in the year 2000. And he allowed very little media coverage. But his rocket landed, as we saw, for reuse. And I didn't know that because I didn't know Bezos was working on that. And he did not allow a lot of people to see that. Meanwhile, Musk has been landing rockets on ships in the Pacific trying to get the balance just right. And he would put it on video and release it to the public, something Bezos and Blue Origin, I don't think really did very much, or if at all. The point is, Musk has been more open about his project, but both have been working on about the same aspect of reusable rockets, which in the end make space flight cheaper.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you got it right. It's interesting about the SpaceX part of it, though, Bill, because he was working on a government contract to NASA, right? So that's public money, right? That's our taxpayers' money. And maybe that's why. I don't know. It's a good question. But typically when the government is doing something like that, they have the responsibility to, or at least at NASA, we always felt this way. And that's what NASA is. You know, if something's a DOD project where it's classified, maybe it's different. But for civilian space programs, which is what NASA is, we more or less owed the taxpayer kind of an appraisal of how it's going. And so all of our photos at NASA are public domain, and our videos are public domain that we did while we were, while people do that, all the stuff that comes down from the space station and all the photos and so on. So there's very little that is not. So I think maybe that's part of it too, is that with Elon Musk, maybe that's why, is because a lot of that was NASA stuff, or it could be that it is more of a marketing difference in it. But Jeff Bezos, and their approach to it. But Jeff Bezos, yeah, it's true. He has been a little less quiet, not necessarily searching out the limelight in this until what he felt the time was right. And once he was really sure that he could put people on his spaceship successfully, he did set up that one seat for auction and gave one away to Wally Funk, and invited his brother to come along. And it made it quite a media spectacle. As you were saying, I think you mentioned 2 million people watching on your network
at least.
Alone. That's the way he did it. So maybe it's just different approaches, different marketing strategies, different culture, different personalities, probably all mixed up on how people want to approach this.
A couple more questions for you, Mike. Really appreciate your time, too, by the way. I was talking with my team earlier today. I said, I'm going to talk to Massimino. I said, I got all these questions about like where we're going with space, given the Bezos experience this past week. And one of my producers said, why would I go on a space vacation? There's no pool and there's no bar.
Right.
And I thought, well, there might be a bar, but there's definitely not a pool. It was sarcasm to a degree, but I think it drives at a fundamental question. Why do people want to do this, Mike?
I think there are different reasons. I think I can answer in my own case. I watched Neil Armstrong walk on the moon, and Jeff Bezos, I think it might be a year or two younger than I am, but we're around the same age, and that had a big influence on him. I know that because he's told me that he is that's why he calls this rocket ship New Shepard, because it mimics Alan Shepard's flight, the first American in space. His orbital vehicle is named New Glenn after John Glenn. His lander on the moon is called New Armstrong after Neil Armstrong. And the reusability aspect of this, I think, hit home with him. He told me this, that he saw those rockets, those boosters going to the moon, land in the ocean to never be used again. and it bothered him that they threw all that stuff away. He actually, on his own dime, went out with treasure hunters. He commissioned treasure hunters to go out and recovered on his own money. He recovered a lot of those boosters and rocket engines from the Apollo days at the bottom of the ocean and gave them away to museums. And I think he's still refurbishing those that he's recovered. So he's seen this. It's been, and so I bring that in because I think that's some of the passion I had. I saw that happen. I saw Neil Armstrong walk on the moon, and I idolized those astronauts. And more than that, I felt like the most important thing we could do was explore space. That's where the future is. That's where we are headed as people. That's where the answers to the big questions are. Where did we come from? How do we take care of this planet properly? Where do we go next? It's all there. And so for me, I wanted to be firsthand part of that and experience it. And that's why I wanted to go. I think other people, there may be different reasons why. I think some people are just thrill seekers and they're looking for that next thrill. I am not a thrill seeker, Bill. I have no need to jump out of an airplane unless it's on fire. I'm not, I'm staying inside. I would never do anything like that. And I don't consider myself a thrill seeker, but I think a lot of people are looking for that ultimate experience. And I don't think there can be anything cooler to do than fly in space. I think it is the coolest thing people can do is fly in space. That's just my opinion. But it's such an extraordinary opportunity to do that. I think just from the sheer experience of it, I think there's interest there. And I think there's other interests too. I think some people want to do it to represent a cause that they're interested in. What Wally Funk did by going, I think, is where awareness for how we've come from what was available to women, to young ladies, young girls when they're young, what they could grow up to be. And I think having Wally Funk there could raise an awareness of that. People want to go up to raise awareness about different charities. There's going to be this flight coming up, this inspiration flight that's on a SpaceX vehicle, is I think trying to raise awareness for St. Jude's Hospital. There's going to be research reasons to go there as well. People can do experiments, make new discoveries. There's different reasons to go. Yeah. And I think that not everyone wants to go. I would say probably most people who are walking around the planet now probably don't want to go. But you even mentioned to me, you would go in a heartbeat. You said, you're whatever reasons you might have. So I think that not everyone's going to want to go. That's true. But I think enough people do. And I think that once you see that it's possible, if you think that something is beyond your reach, you're like, why am I even going to bother? I think a lot of people feel that way. And in some ways, I felt like that trying to become an astronaut because it was near impossible to get through that selection process. It was so competitive. And I never thought I'd be able to do that successfully, but I knew I at least wanted to try, and it worked out, and that was great. My dream came true. I think now, hopefully, with the access being opened up, and of course, it's going to cost a lot of money at first. It's only going to be open to the very rich. But hopefully that price will come down so that more people can go and experience it and be a part of this for whatever reason they may have. And I think when that opportunity is open, I think the creativity of people are going to flow of how they could use that experience to make the world a better place.
Well, it's a great answer. Really. That's quite thoughtful. I would do it initially because I kind of am a thrill seeker. But I think the experience itself, though, would change me. And yes. I would come back and I would think about it. I would understand it in a different way, Mike.
Yep. I think it gives you a different perspective on things.
But initially, I would want to feel zero G, and I'd want to feel the thrust of the engines, and strap it on and let's go. I'm going to ask you the big question about where we are in 20 years in a moment here. But I wanted to did you hear Bezos talk about what he would do in the future with pollution and sending it to space? I don't know if you caught it or not. I don't know what it means, but he was talking about, hey, big ideas sometimes take decades to happen, but he mentioned it. He brought it up. What is this idea about taking Earth pollution and sending it up into space?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's that. I heard him say that, and when my reaction to that, Bill, is like, wow, I don't know how you would do that, but if anybody can figure that out, it's like one of these really smart entrepreneur guys. Because they see the world a little bit differently, certainly than I do, and I think most of us do maybe. And he knows how to put people together to do some pretty amazing things in his different businesses and ideas that he's created So I think having him turn his attention to space travel and to this problem of figuring out solutions to our planet that our planet needs by utilizing space. How you do that, I don't have any idea. I'm not sure if he knows 100% right now, but I think he knows how to put a team together, and he has the vision to make things and the resources to make things like that possible. And wouldn't that be great? And that's what, a lot of the space program too is not about going other places. It's about making our planet better. And I think it's wonderful that he's going to be trying to do that. And I would not doubt anything that he or any of these other guys, these other entrepreneurs who are in space, Branson or Elon Musk, anything that they say, I don't. They're very credible. They are able to deliver and try in amazing ways to get things done. And I think it would be great if he turns his attention to somehow cleaning up our planet by utilizing space to do that.
I think the one thing these three men have in common, they challenge their companies with their own ideas to go ahead and try and succeed. I mean, that's pretty evident, right? I mean, Bezos clearly did that with Amazon, et cetera, and we'll see whether or not your package comes next with a drone. Because he would like that to happen. Final question here, Mike, and terrific conversation with you, by the way. It's 2021. Can you see where we are in 2041, 20 years from now, and where this is going?
Well, I hope that each one of these companies that we've talked about and other companies as well are more and more successul. So what I would love to see in 2021, if you look at Branson's, I don't know what I really don't know what his business plan is. But I would really love it if he had he used to own an airline, right? So he's kind of a transportation guy and a cruise line, I think, too, if I'm right on that. But getting people places on the planet, I would love to see it that we could get on one of these rocket planes and go coast to coast in minutes, if we could, or just giving a faster ways to get around our planet. That might be, again, really expensive, but hopefully the prices for all these things have come down. But I hope we're able to travel places more easily and efficiently, and hopefully it doesn't cost too much. And I hope that access to space for those who want to experience on a suborbital level, the price has really dropped, and that it's anyone who wants to go can go, maybe for the price of a really expensive vacation. Let's put it there, that whatever that means to people. And then I really hope that we are doing things more commercially in space, that it's not just a government in low Earth orbit. There's another company called Axiom, which is going to be having private astronaut missions, including one coming up. I think it's either going to be end of this year. I think it's more likely to be early next year, where people have paid a whole lot of money to launch on SpaceX, the International Space Station. So I hope that there's a commercial space station 20 years from now that's thriving in orbit, and I hope we have an operation on the moon. I hope that one of these guys has figured out how to do that, where we can have tourism, research, and also some sort of industrial economic benefit, energy being cultivated from the moon as well. So I hope we're back there to stay 20 years from now. I hope there's a moon base that's operational. And maybe by then, either have people who have been to Mars, or we're very close to getting people on Mars.
Wow, that long. I was about to say, you think within 5 years we're on the red planet, and based on that answer, we're not.
I don't think so. I think that's still, I mean, if Elon Musk says we're going to do it, I wouldn't doubt him. But, I think that's a bit of a way off. I think in my opinion, I think, who knows what's going to happen. So whatever I say is, it's very unlikely that it'll actually happen. But I could see us getting back to the moon and learning how to exist on a planetary surface on the moon. It was just different. We've had people on space station for 20 years. Not the same people. We switch them out. But we've had a human presence on the space station for over 20 years. So we know how to put people in space for 6 months to a year. We know how to deal with a long-duration space flight in zero gravity. But the moon is different. There's a little bit of gravity like there will be on Mars. There's also dust and rocks and things like that. And you're further away on the moon, but nowhere near as far away as you are on Mars. On the moon, on low Earth orbit, on my missions, I'd say if we said, Houston, we have a problem, you're going to almost instantaneously, in a second, you'll get a response. On the moon, you say, Houston, we have a problem, and with about a 3 seconds delay, you'll say, you'll get a response. On Mars, you'll say, Houston, we have a problem, and 20 to 30 minutes later, someone's going to say, oh, what was that? And so it's no way, there's no way to get that quick communication, that quick help. You're going to need to be really independent on Mars, and you're a long way away. And I don't think 5 years from now I'd be really surprised if we're able to put people on Mars within 5 years.
So then
the moon within 5 years is doable.
Yeah.
And then I think once we do that, I think it'll speed up our timeline to Mars.
You need a lunar colony or a lunar base.
I think
before
so,
you
yes.
go very deep.
I think the moon is our playground. It's in orbit with us around the sun. It's in a different orbit. It takes a lot of power to get there. We haven't had people there in over 50 years, right? Or close to that, close to 50 years. 52 years ago, the first one. We just celebrated that anniversary a couple of days ago, which Jeff Bezos chose for his launch day. But it's not, it's hard enough to get there. We haven't been there in 50 years, right? So and we were just there for a visit. So I think going back there and settling there, and the moon, again, it's a day and a half voyage. It's always with us. Whereas with Mars, there's only certain times where we can get there because that's when when the orbits are going to be close enough to each other that the timing is right. And that's the shortest time to get there is about 6 months. And that's when our planets are closest to each other because we're in different orbits. We go around the sun we're not necessarily aligned in a configuration where we can get there expeditiously. And even expeditiously means at least 6 months. And then you're going to be there for a while to do your exploration, and then you're going to have to wait for the planets to align again so you can come back. And so you're looking at a minimum of around a 2-year journey, and that's a long time to be away from home when you're so far away from help. I think speaking to the Apollo astronauts, that's the thing that I don't think I appreciated as much. Talking to them about their experiences, that they were still in close contact with the control center. And a lot of people have seen the movie Apollo 13, right? So you know how important that control center is when there's a problem. And when you're that far away from help, and it's not just the distance, it's the communication time, you cannot use the control center in that way to solve a problem quickly. You're going to have to be independent, and that adds a whole layer of complexity that may not be obvious.
No. Thank you, Mike. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your insight. Well done. Mike Massimino, astronaut, Columbia University, the intrepid, and the host of Two Funny Astronauts. Check out his podcast, too. Mike, thank you. Have a terrific weekend, and we will speak again very soon.
Bill, it's always great to spend time with you, and thanks for your interest, and I hope to see you in person soon.
Right on. Yeah, you bet.
All right, buddy.
Thanks for the journey. Mike Massimino. I'm Bill Hemmer. This is Hemmer Time.
For the full podcast, go to foxnewspodcast.com.